ECC 321 International Business and Trade. This is the overview of international business. This is the work of Group 1. The Group 1 presenters are first, yours truly, Steve Mendoza, followed by Villanueva. And now let's move on with the chapter objectives. In this chapter, we should be able to learn the following. First, define the meaning and significance of globalization and international business. Explain how international business is different from domestic business. Delineate the characteristics of an MNC. And discuss the properties of evolution of international business and its development, and lastly, to explain the factors leading to the phenomenal growth in international business during the past 50 years. Okay, at this point, let's have the concept of globalization. Globalization is a process through which different economies get their interwoven by way of international trade and investment. They become an integral part of the world economy and moves towards open economic policies, lifting up a restriction imposed on international economic flows that in turn leads to a sharp increase in the quantum of such flows. And here are the evidences to show that there is a globalization. If the globalization fosters close linkages among countries through the flow of goods, labor, and capital. The evidence of globalization was found a couple of centuries ago, but it is only since 1950s and especially in the recent decades that globalization is distinctly visible. In fact, the move towards globalization was afoot a couple of centuries ago when the European country was following the Industrial Revolution, began reporting their manufactured products and in turn importing necessary raw materials. Subsequently, they made foreign investment to ensure continued supply of raw material. The impact of globalization. The impact of globalization has been positive as far as rate of economic growth is concerned, with the process of globalization picking up the pace with a phenomenal growth in external trade and foreign direct and portfolio investment. There is a marked, profound positive impact on the economic growth, labor markets, and income and macro and microeconomic policies which different governments are pursuing. Well, let's move on with the meaning and importance of international business. International business means carrying a business activities beyond national boundaries. It normally includes the transactions of economic resources such as goods, capital, or services, comprising technology, skilled labor, transportation, and others. And international production. Production may either involve production of physical goods or provisions of services like bank, finance, insurance, construction, and trading, and so on. Thus, international business includes not only international trade of goods and services but also foreign investment, especially foreign direct investment, or known as the FDI. The developing countries with a weak balance of payments position, it helps large foreign exchange resources and the latest technologies, and also develops managerial capabilities as it bridges the resource gap. At the microeconomic level, from the viewpoint of maximizing corporate wealth, it is the interest of the firm to export the product to foreign markets and capture a large share of the markets abroad, especially when the domestic market is saturated. Corporate wealth is the value of product assets plus the present value of wealth created by those assets. Alternatively, it is sum of the value of debt and equity in a firm. At this point, let's move on with the domestic business versus international business. When we say domestic business, it involves those economic transactions that takes place inside the geographical boundaries of a country, or it is limited. When we say international business, it includes international transactions of economic international production of goods and supervisions of services. Additional differences between of them is that there are many complexities in international business that are not found in case of domestic business. Transaction in international business is mostly intra-firm. Varying environment such as a political, legal, economic, sociocultural, and ethical in host countries is often known to the firm. Varying strategies of business are adopted in different host countries. Moreover, the very management function in the international business differs from those in domestic business. The differences are visible mainly in the area of accounting and finance, personnel, marketing, and production. What unique in such cases is that transactions often involve transfer pricing, is the arbitrary pricing of intra-firm transaction or more or less than the arm's length prices. This meant primarily to reduce tax and tariffs and maximize the global profit of a firm.
Multinational corporation is an enterprise with substantial part of its operation in a number of foreign countries. MNCs or multinational corporations are responsible for a very large segment of international trade, intra-firm as well as intra-firm, and in the largest part of foreign direct investment. An NMC or the multinational corporation is sometimes known as transnational corporation or supranational corporation. Nevertheless, it is an enterprise that owns or controls production or service facilities outside the country in which it is based. Based on the strategic features, MNCs are grouped as ethnocentric firms and polycentric firms. And ethnocentric firms are those that adopt home market-oriented policies and seldom distinguish between domestic operation and global operations policies. Polycentric firms operate in foreign countries just to cater to the demand in those countries, means that they follow a host market-oriented policies. Evolution and development of international business. Process of evolutions are long. The process of evolution of domestic firm into a multinational corporation involves three successive stages. First, the trade, secondly, the assembly or the production, and the third one is the integration.
Now, let's move on with the post-war developments. In 1940, the economy of the US turned out to be the strongest. American industries were developed and needed to acquire new sources of raw materials. They wanted to acquire the largest share of the world market. In the year 1950, all this led to rapid internationalization of US firms. During the 2 decades beginning from 1950, US foreign direct investment from 12 billion to 80 billion. In the year 1960, many European firms too turned into multinationals company. In 1970, there was substantial growth in Japanese MNCs, and only the Japanese MNC was listed among the largest 50 companies. In the 1980, the number rose to 6. In that said year, the Japanese became the largest producers of automobiles, a position that was enjoyed by the USA until then. In the year 1970s, the firms of the developing countries began operating internationally. The two were two sets of developing countries, which is first, the oil exporting countries that had required huge of foreign exchange reserves in a wake of oil crisis at the 1970s. Second, newly industrializing countries that imported technology from developing countries and built up their international base. The firms from both types of the developing countries established their affiliates abroad in a big way, which is called the European Union. The European Union consists of the 25 countries. Okay, at this point, let's move on with the list of the most prominent MNCs in the Eastern Europe. First, we have Primark Shipping Corporation. It is a Russian Federation engaged in transportation, followed by Zalakeramia RT. It's a Hungary engaged in manufacturing clay product. The third one is the Plivia Didi. It is a Croatia engaged in pharmaceuticals. Then the fourth one is the Novoship Corporation. It is a Russian Federation engaged in transportation. Last, we have Polycolor SA or the Romania producing chemicals. It simply shows that the growth of international business during the past 5 decades or so, it is evident that prior to 1960s, the dominant international pattern of international companies was distinct in the sense of the affiliates were self-contained as far as possible, and they were barely small clones of mother company were scattered around the world. But the growing control of the parent company was not relinquished by the host country governments, as it often crushed in the interest. Host country government began playing decisive role in the decision-making of international firms. They framed various rules and regulations to the conduct of international companies. It signifies that international business came to be fraught with growing complexities. Juncture, let's move on with the recent trends. The international business was greatly constrained by the oil shock and many restrictive policies pursued by many developing countries during the 1970s, but it was resumed by the mid-1980s and grew in the subsequent period. It simply means that the increased price of oil has a huge effects in the international business. Why? It's because most everything in the business needs to engage in shipping or transportation or delivering, wherein the oil is the main mode of transportation in order it to operate. That between 1983 and 1990, FDI outflow grew an average annual rate of 27%, which almost fourfold greater than the growth of the world output and around threefold greater than the growth of the world's exports. In simple thoughts to remember, as we can see in the graph from past years, in the year 2008, the FDI are growing, or it shows the positive changes. It reflects the annual growth rate tables in the increase and decrease of amount in the previous years. As we observe from the year 1990 to 2007, the impact in us were positive except in the year 2001-2005. In the FDI inflows, it results to negative. The most terrifying year results based on the table is the year 2008. Due to international financial crisis, the FDI results to negative change that will lead to breakdown of the FDI. For example, last year during the time of the pandemic, where everything closed except important commodities for survival such as foods or groceries and waters, other establishments were totally closed that year as well. FDI gets shut down as well. The GNI and worldwide were affected. At this point, let's move on with the merger and acquisition. When we say merger and acquisition, is the best example for this is that there is a running company from the United States and wanted to combine with a firm here in the Philippines. That's what we call a merger acquisition. At this point, let's move on with the other remarkable feature is owning to the growth of FDI flow in general and emergence of MNCs in developing as well as in transition countries in a big way. In share of these countries, the FDI flow has increased. In the table 1.2 FDI inflows in different groups of countries, it shows that the share of the developing countries in the global FDI inflow and move up and down, but they remained lower than those developed countries. The transition of economies, however, increased their shares in the global FDI inflows from around 2% in 2000 to around 6% in the year 2008. Based on the FDI inflows growth via graph, it shows that the world trade in the year 2008 was as high as 15.8 trillion. The MNCs has a big role in increasing the volume of trade. However, in recent decades, the small and medium-sized multinationals, or so-called mini multinationals that have come to possess globalizing efficiency, almost at par with a big organization, to account for sizable world trade. Thus, international business has witnessed a phenomenal growth in the recent past. And now let's move on with the factors leading to growth in international business in recent decades. First in line, we have the rapid technological advancement, followed by emergence of supportive institutions. Third, openness of the economic policies among large number of countries. Fourth, breakdown of the former USSR. And last, we have the increase in competition. In summary, globalization is a process through which different economies come closer to one another by way of trade and investment. When we say international business, it includes international transactions, economic resources, international production of goods, and provision of services. When we say international business is different from domestic business. When we say domestic business, it is limited to national frontiers, while international business spreads beyond them. International business involves many complexities that are related to inter-firm transactions and to unfamiliar host country environment, regulatory, economic, financial, political, legal, socio-cultural, ethical, and many others. Moreover, the very management function in the international business differs from those in the domestic business. The most significant participant in the international business is the MNC. It operates simultaneously in many countries. The international business did not emerge overnight and has in fact developed over several centuries. The earliest phase was manifested in trade, then followed by international production. The element of integration is the latest addition. Centuries ago, international business manifested itself in the trade of exotic goods. In a wake of industrial revolution in England and other European countries, international production made a beginning, but it was limited mainly to exploration of minerals and production of primary commodities.